Welcome back, my friends. Perry once more to talk about database administrators. DBAs, big job. Big job, great job. Lots of these jobs out there, and they're not going anywhere. So we're going to dig in and talk about what the database administrator does. Because the reality is there's some overlap right now. In this course, we've talked about BI, business intelligence a bit, reporting. There's definitely some overlap there. Every piece of information in the world is in a database. So during the information portion of the training, we talked about how much data there is and the fact that 90% of that data has just come into existence in the last 2 years. So because there's so much information, so much data, the demand for having databases and having talented database administrators, it's not slowing down. It's huge. And if you like this job, if you explore this job and you're like, wow, that seems really interesting, it is a great career choice. I absolutely guarantee you it. You will never be unemployed if you're a proficient database administrator. Now, the database administrator, or DBA, and we're just going to say DBA from now on because that's what everyone else calls them, their job is to ensure the performance, integrity, and security of the databases. And remember, most folks will never go directly to a database. A database is always accessed through another application. So your banking application, your data is in a database, but you're generally going through some kind of web interface or mobile interface that then connects to the database. If you're on Amazon, you're using a web page that connects to a database. Facebook, your data is in a database, but you're accessing it through a web page. So generally the database is behind the scenes, but it's where all the data is, so it's super critical. And the DBA is the person that makes sure that those environments are secure, they're performing properly, and that they can scale based on the needs of the company and the applications that are connected to those databases. They're also responsible for a lot of reporting. We talked a bit about business intelligence. Those guys tend to overlap a lot. And actually, you'll see DBAs who will go into BI or the other way around. Modern database administrators really have to be good at working with reporting tools to output reports on specific data that resides in the databases. And that kind of line gets a little graded with BI, but often DBAs will do a lot of BI work, business intelligence work. They'll do a lot of reporting work, and that's a big chunk of their job. Also, they have to work with developers and network and systems engineers to integrate those databases with all those systems that we were talking about. So inevitably, it is a job where they have to interface with other parts of information technology to ensure that the databases are properly integrated with whatever application they're associated to. And it could be multiple systems. You could have multiple systems pulling data from one set of databases. It really just depends on the architecture of the application. So again, a very broad job with a lot of responsibility. Now, databases do most of the work in information systems that we use every day. And the DBA ensures the stability and performance of those databases. That's really a critical job. And that used to be kind of their primary job. But then they started getting more into the reporting aspects, the business intelligence aspects. So now you have DBAs who are primarily focused on things like architecture, stability, performance, and you have DBAs who are focused more on the reporting BI side of the house. So you can't have DBAs doing all of that, especially with small organizations. But as this demand on information on data has driven more and more databases, you're starting to see more specialized roles for DBAs, i.e. reporting BI DBAs or infrastructure performance driven DBAs. And skills database administrators, as I said, are really hard to find. I mean, I'm telling you, I've tried to find DBAs for projects and I couldn't find one to save my life. Especially if they're a specialized DBA. So let's say that you're doing a mobile project and you're trying to integrate a mobile application product into a database. Trying to find someone who has that experience, crazy. So as a DBA, especially in a major market like San Francisco, New York, Seattle, they can get as much as $250,000 a year, especially if they're working in specialized fields, mobile, etc. You can really do very well as a DBA. Now, obviously those numbers are pretty high, but in terms of growth 31% growth. That's a lot. That's a really aggressive growth. And almost 250,000 jobs will be created by 2020. Now, average salary for a DBA, and this is a high entry level salary. We're talking 80 grand if you get certified. Let's say you just got out of college, you get certified as a DBA. Maybe you came out of school with a computer information systems degree or some other tech degree, and you get certified as a database administrator. You'll get 80 grand, no problem. You're working 4 to 8 years, 4 to 8 years as a DBA, you can make as much as 150 grand. In a more broad, non-specialized field. As I mentioned, though, if you specialize in really high-demand applications where there's just none of these guys available, you can make $250,000 a year. All right, so traits of a database administrator, and this is definitely a very specific kind of job that requires a specific kind of person, specific kind of mindset. Really should have excellent attention to detail. You can't have your head in the clouds on this one. You really got to be paying attention because one data field misconfigured, one part of the database, set up inappropriately can really cause tons of problems across the applications that are connecting to it or the data that's being output from it. And they have to be really good at solving problems because inevitably things will happen. You'll have collisions, you'll have database tables that get corrupted, all this stuff that they have to deal with on a daily basis. They have to be tenacious problem solvers. And they have to be assertive. You've really got to take action because at the end of the day, the DBA's job is on the line because you want to talk about the buck stopping. The data is the product, right? You have definitely your interfaces and the user experience, but all the data, if the data gets corrupted, if the databases actually get deleted, it's all done. So you really have to be a strong, assertive person when it comes to things like backups and best practices and performance tuning. You've got to make sure that your environment, your database environment, is super healthy. Good analytical skills, that seems like it goes without saying. You definitely have to have good analytical skills as a DBA. And able to focus on a single problem for several hours at a time. This one is why I'm not a DBA. I'm just going to be totally honest. I do not have the attention to be an effective DBA because the reality is you have to be so tenacious as a DBA because when you think again about how much information are in these databases and how many different apps can connect to a single database and how many potential problems could bring down a whole process, company, website, you've got to be able, if there's a problem, you need to sit there until it's solved. And you have to be super focused to make that happen. So again, if you're a patient person and you're good at solving problems, this is a great job for you. If you're ADD, I would rethink it for sure. Strong mathematically, definitely a lot of math involved in being a good database administrator. You got to be able to function under pressure. As I said, if the databases go down, the site goes down, the company goes down, it's all over. So you got to be able to deal with pressure. You can work alone a lot as a DBA. It's not uncommon, especially if you're focused on performance and infrastructure. You could definitely, not have to interface with a team as much as you might, as say, as a project manager or another role. So you got to be comfortable working, being a self-starter and working alone. But you also will interface with a team, so you can't be such a hermit that you can't, work with others occasionally. And that whole seeing the big picture, data is just a huge universe unto itself, and you have to see how all the pieces come together to really understand it. And being a little mildly obsessive, not such a bad thing for a database administrator. It's kind of good to be obsessive about any number of things having to do with the data. Because I can't stress this enough, the data is sacred. So many companies now, think about Facebook. If the data gets deleted in Facebook, what do they have, really? I mean, data is sacred, and you have to be obsessive about those databases to ensure that companies are prosperous and successful and, don't get sued. So being a little mildly obsessive, not such a bad thing. All right, so database platforms. There's basically 3 to keep in mind. Probably the 2 most common are Microsoft SQL and Oracle. There are a lot of SQL servers out there. I think like 92% of companies, definitely Fortune 400 companies, have Microsoft SQL. It's just a very common platform. It's reasonably inexpensive. There's a lot of skilled DBAs to support it. It integrates with all of Microsoft's other suites, such as its collaboration platforms like SharePoint. It's just a very, very common, well-used platform. It's very well documented. It's easy to train for. And it's a great place to start. If you're thinking about becoming a database administrator, I would probably start with Microsoft SQL. There's definitely going to be jobs out there, and there's a really clear like training certification path to get on board of becoming a certified database administrator. Oracle, though, Oracle pays more. I just some people might like give me the hairy eyeball for saying that, but if you become an Oracle database administrator, you can make 200 grand a year, no problem. Oracle tends to support much larger implementations where data is super critical. So things like enterprise resource planning sites, large HR systems for large companies. Systems where if the databases were corrupted or there were any major problems, it cost the company millions of dollars. That's when they use Oracle. However, Oracle is extremely expensive to do, and there's, I've never heard an Oracle implementation under $1 million. Most Oracle implementations are, several $1 million. And Oracle resources are a couple $100 an hour. $300 an hour is not an uncommon rate. So definitely Oracle's worth looking at. If you're just starting out and you just want to scratch the surface, you could start with Microsoft SQL and then get into Oracle. But Oracle is its own thing. They're their own universe. They're a little more closed. They're not nearly as open as Microsoft for sure. So you got to really go out there and probably pay for some pretty expensive training to get certified as an Oracle database administrator. It's a good investment, don't get me wrong, but it's not the easiest path. Definitely going the Microsoft SQL route a lot easier. The freeware, and that's used by a lot of products and more open source guys, is MySQL. And MySQL is very popular, but it tends to be used as part of a product. So if an individual is selling a software as a service, or on the web, or they're selling a product that they need a strong database back in, they'll often use MySQL to do that because it's much less expensive than SQL Server or Oracle. So you see a lot of MySQL, not so much in the enterprise business space, but much more so as part of applications where they're self-contained. So Microsoft SQL, very popular, very prevalent in the marketplace, very easy to study, certify, and get a job. Oracle, awesome, pays great, big demand. However, a little more closed of an ecosystem, and you're probably going to have to make a much more significant investment in getting trained for Oracle. And then MySQL, much more of a kind of a standalone app for different applications. All that being said, what do? How should you proceed? If I was thinking about becoming a if I was thinking about becoming a database administrator, I would really start with Microsoft SQL Server, and I would become a Microsoft certified database administrator. They have a whole certification track for that available. If you go to Microsoft.com and search for certified database administrator, you're going to get a ton of information. That is really the best way to start out. However, if you're really interested in long-term making a lot of money, go to Oracle's website, search for certifications, and they outline the whole thing there in terms of how you can get on the path to being a database administrator. All right, thanks, folks. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to include a ton of links in the show notes that will take you out to all the different certification sites so that you can explore the different paths to getting certified as a database administrator. All right, stand by for the next 6-figure career plan. Appreciate it.